Hi, this is King Fally from Deceased and October 31, and you're rocking with Poppitt's Corner.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome, episode 109 of Poppitt's Corner, and we're going to do something a little different today. I've never done an interview with somebody kind of in the behind the scenes with working with a record label, and I've decided why not bring on my good buddy Mr. Patrick Ramseier on from Old School Metal Records, and we can just talk shop and learn a little bit about what goes on behind the scenes in a record label. So, Patrick, thanks so much again for coming on and hanging with me, man. I really do appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Tanner. Good to see you and good to talk to you. I'm looking forward to this.
Absolutely. So usually the basis of the show is I like to go through the guests' pretty much entire like musical career. So like what they started listening to pretty much nowadays, and this comes
Mhm.
but I want to apply the same treatment to you, and the only difference is you started the record label, and we'll see if you were in any bands and whatnot. So if you're ready, man, I'd love to get started.
Yeah, sure. Let's go.
Cool. So, what? Tell me your first recollection of just kind of hearing music for the first time, and what was it?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first music that I heard probably was what my parents listened to, which, I grew up in Switzerland, so it was a lot of Swiss folks music and German folks music, and probably a little bit of um, more the German music at that time in the 70s, and then do you know Deutsche Welle came out, with bands like Trio and Falco and all kinds of crazy weird pop music, and that didn't appeal to me at all, you know. But I do recollect, I think it was around my 10th birthday, roughly in that neighborhood, where my cousin puts a headset on me and says, "Hey, listen to this." And it's the beginning from Fast as a Shark of Accept. And
And
and it starts with this, folks music. And I'm taking the headset off. And I'm like, what is this crap? I don't want to listen to this. And he goes, no, no, put it back on. And so he started the LP over. I put it on. And as it's finishing with the folks music part, that scream, I put my hands behind the headset and hurl the headset across the room because it scared the crap out of me, from that day on, I was hooked. I just, there was something about, this music that appealed to me. So that's the first recollection of metal that I remember.
do you know what kind of bands were you getting into, like almost immediately after this specific moment?
I think there was Saxon, Blackfoot, AC/DC, and then it was progressively going faster and more brutal as it progressed, and I went pretty quickly to, you know, to, well, faster brutal is probably an exaggeration. Kiss, I was a huge Kiss fan for a while. I just thought the whole mask, the paint they were wearing was really cool. And then after that, I decided, there's so much cool music out there, and it's so much faster and better. And then it went from that to, Anthrax, Suicidal, Testament, and also SOD, and then very shortly after, even hardcore music as well. So it was a very fast progression. Once I got to the Anthrax and Testament, it went all, fast and furious. And that was, there were only a handful of people back then in where I grew up that were into this kind of stuff, like the Celtic Frost, the Messiah, the Coroner, Poltergeist, and all those bands in Switzerland. And we kind of knew each other, it was a clique, and we would see each other at concerts and stuff like that. So it became kind of like more than just music, but it became more of like the group you hung out with, obviously.
It seems like you guys you specifically were getting into more kind of American style bands. So,
Hmm.
how did you discover these specific bands in Switzerland?
I have friends, I was friends with the Fear of God guys. I was friends with some other people, and they were tape trading. I was tape trading with Mick Harris from Napalm Death, and things like that. And it was just, you had these fanzines that came out, or the metal magazines, and we would just all tape trade and talk to each other.
And so I'm assuming you were gaining, some of these tape tradings from, I don't know, say the States and from the Bay Area. So they were probably sending you demos from these specific bands and whatnot.
Yeah, there were demos. Like what I was just talking to somebody yesterday. One of a key demo that I got, besides all the Napalm Death stuff. That's the cool part about, when Mick sent you a demo or something, he would send you rehearsals as well, or he would send you other things that he thinks you might want to listen to from other bands, at the time, and that's how I found a lot of stuff out. And like I said, and my other friends would do the same thing, right? They had pen pals from the States and from other places, and they would trade tapes, So I got, and then that was the beginning of Nuclear Blast too, at that time. So he would advertise in the magazines, hey, this is the stuff that's coming out, and then we would just dig into that stuff. But yeah, it was predominantly just friends from all around the world at that point.
And so, and was the metal community, I guess, was it small because of this, or did it seem really kind of gigantic because, you were just, you knew all the kind of the same people around this time?
Yeah, I think that made it somewhat more accessible and more small to us. I didn't think of it as this huge entity at the time. I knew there were a lot of bands, right? But I never thought of it as, coming from a small little country, I never understood the concept of this is going to be a huge community worldwide. I never looked at it that way. Now that I'm living in the States, it's a huge community. I mean, it's a different perspective.
Interesting. See, I always found it was the opposite, where I thought this was this ginormous kind of community. And when I looked into it a little bit, I'm more ingrained in it now, but it's gotten a lot smaller to me. It seems like we all know the same kind of people and whatnot. And everybody's kind of,
it definitely became smaller. It definitely came smaller. I mean, if you look back, right, there was a huge boom in the 80s, like late 80s, early 90s, and then it went away for a good 6 years. I actually didn't listen to metal for probably 6 years because when I moved to America, I couldn't find anybody at that point because I wasn't entrenched. And then I started meeting people, right? I started meeting Walter Morgan, Chuck Billy, people, I mean, neighbors, they were my neighbors where I lived, so it's kind of like, oh, okay. So, I mean, my first thrash metal concert was Testament, and Anthrax, and now I'm sitting at his house. I mean, how surreal is that? So things like that. So it became smaller, and then it's growing again. But from my perspective, I was talking about, there's a community in Asia, there's a community in Europe, there's a community in England. England is part of Europe, but they had kind of their own community. And then, South America, Northern America, it is huge from that perspective. But you're absolutely right. We know all the same people at this point, and from that perspective, it is getting smaller, I think.
And it doesn't. And the great thing about it though is like, I think we all have each other's backs as far as when shit goes wrong normally. But it doesn't matter the age or the sex, the race, the anything. We all just the common bond here, the commonality is the music itself. Would you agree?
Yeah. I would agree with that. There's always people out there that especially when you run a label that or if you're making music, like in your case with Mad Roast, there's always people that kind of wish you ill, well, kind of, but in general, like if you look back, right? Thrash of the Titans, Thrash Against Cancer. When things go wrong, people have your back. People come and they rally and they help you. And that's the thing that I like about both the hardcore community as well as the metal community. They kind of rally for one another and they help each other. That's really something that's key for me.
Absolutely. Now let's go just back a little bit, and kind of walk me through why you kind of chose to move to the States. Because obviously you were joined. Was there just not a big enough community for you? Did you want to kind of venture off and see what it was like in the States, or did you have a job out here, or?
Uh, Funny story. I've actually always said that I was going to move to the States. I don't know how old I was, maybe 15, 16. What do you want to do? "Oh, I'm going to move to the States." And then I visited my buddy in California, and my now wife walks in, and now I joke that I'm an import husband, but but yeah, that's really the story, right? I moved because of my wife.
Oh, okay. So what commonality did you guys specifically have? Is she kind of into the same kind of bands as you, or?
None of that. None of it. Literally none of it. No, we just clicked, fully clicked. And they do say opposites attract, right? So that's really what happened. She doesn't like metal music. She doesn't like hardcore music. I don't like the music she listens to either. But that works out for us. I have no problem with that,
And did you start going to a lot of the Bay Area shows? Or when did you move out to the specifically the Bay Area?
So I moved straight into the Bay Area when I came here in '93. So July 1st, '93 is when I moved here. So it will be my 28th year in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever it is. And there were not many metal shows at that time. And again, I wasn't dialed in at all. So I didn't listen to metal for quite a while. I did meet a bunch of people that through sports and things like that I was doing later on, and they were like, "Oh yeah, metal community is still here." And then I found out, like where I lived at the time. So when I moved, we lived in Stockton because that's where my wife's family is from, and like Punch and Stench, which is a band that I've been friends with for over 30 years at this point, they played Stockton, and I didn't know, while I was living there, and that kind of bummed me out, because I'm like, I thought the whole thing was dead, and I kind of had this craving for this type of old school music, right? And that's how the whole label started, because of that lack of old school exposure and music that I liked, but then, so I think what was the big turning point was Thrash of the Titans, in 2001.
The cancer, the cancer benefit,
The Chuck Billy cancer benefit,
and the
right?
Chuck Schuldiner one. Yeah.
The Chuck Schuldiner one. That was a turning point for me, right? I mean, I've seen bands there that I've listened to for I don't know how long, I mean, Exodus and SOD played, and Anthrax and Testament and Forbidden and all those bands, and it was just like, holy moly, it's alive, and it was just like it was what we needed to kind of reinvigorate the whole scene, because it was I think it was close to dying, because we had all this Nirvana alternative grunge stuff coming up and taking over for a while, and then there were certain bands that always were there, like Metallica and Slayer to a certain point, but others, they just went away. Death Angel went away, Forbidden went away, Heathen went away, Exodus went away, all of those went away,
And
so they all came back.
And going off of this specific point or whatever, do you feel that it's way later from this specific moment, but do you feel that like some like the new wave of thrash metal kind of invigorated all these old school bands to get back together? Because I always have felt that way. I felt, you know, my generation of the new school thrash or whatever was a huge part in keeping, you know, the old school kind of vibe, I guess, alive. You know, even having good songwriting again was totally key for me. So I don't know how you felt about it.
I agree with that. I mean, if you look at the, you know, bands like yours or Hexen or Ex Mortis and things like that, they played a very technical, very fast-paced, you know, thrash and death metal. I think they definitely kind of like, you know, gave them a kick in the butt and say, hey, you know, this is still alive and well. And then you have bands that, you know, haven't played with each other for, you know, who knows how long, and they go like, dude, we can do this. And look at Death Angel, Testament, Exodus. They're all like super popular again. And I think that is definitely kind of like the circle of life, like you said, you know, the youth injecting more energy and more of that oomph back into the bands.
And what's funny, there's a correlation too, where I mean, a lot of people didn't like the new wave of thrashing because there wasn't kind of a I guess an originality to it. But you know, we felt there was just not enough, you know, good bands out there, and we wanted to play kind of a, you know, that kind of style. And I think that's like, you know, we can play whatever kind of style we want. And with the internet kind of booming up and social media playing a huge part, it just kind of like all worked in the right time, right place kind of vibe. And I think the combination of that is kind of how the old school scene kind of thrived as well, you know, so it all plays a part and whatnot.
Well, I think there's an aspect to that, you know, because you now have people who never were able to listen to this type of music, but they can now through social media, right? And through you don't have to send a tape and wait patiently by the mailbox for a month until something comes from the States or from some other country. You now, you know, hey, I'm going to send you an MP3, check it out, right? So that's a different mentality, and it's definitely part of it. You know, I think I'm not sure if this is true, but to a certain point, I think, you know, the newer bands that were paying homage to the older bands, you know, the Bonded by Bloods and the ones that used names from other bands, I think that could have potentially had a positive and a negative, you know, because like you said, it sounds unoriginal, but then again, it's an homage, which is a good thing, you know. But I can see that some people were turned off from that, you know, because it's kind of like people probably go like, oh, that's sacrilegious, you know, to use something like that. But again, I think if you're a good band and you're bringing it, who cares, right? Just put it all on the line. But on the other hand, you had bands, you know, from people like Jamie Durkin, you know, like Pagan War Machine, and things like that were playing a newer style of metal, yet they were seasoned veterans, you know, and yeah, Angar's Art, the same thing, right? They are veterans that have been in the industry for 20 plus years, and they came out with a fury. You know, I mean, you know, Steve Gaines, you know, you just brought up Angar's Art. I mean, he used all this energy and angst, and he created music that was just, I mean, he sounded like a pissed off teenager, literally, you know, and it worked.
Absolutely. Now let's go back just a little bit before this, and I kind of wanted to ask you, you know, why did you ever play an instrument? For one?
Very poorly guitar. I was in a band that kind of took off a long time ago called Crawl Noise. It was a noisecore band. We recorded one record, and Foad record 2 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, released an LP of it, kind of like that. And that was pretty cool. I was in several other bands, thrash metal bands, but never anything, you know. I don't have the patience to kind of sit there and just play the guitar for hours upon hours. So I never really took off. It's one of the things that I sometimes regret that I didn't pay more attention to it. I always had guitars, and amps, but I never really did anything with it.
Now let's go to you kind of starting the label, and you
Mhm.
mentioned a couple reasons for starting it, right? The lack of the old school kind of vibes to bands
Mhm.
and whatnot and stuff. But how did you initially start this? Did you just go in your room and say, you know what, I'm going to start a record label?
Not quite like that. There was a little aspect of that, right? I was like hemming and hawing over that. There is nothing like that right now, because I felt, and that could have been on me, because I was not seeing it or not open enough for it. But the whole thing came actually to fruition at Walken Open Air in 2004. I was sitting with my buddies, Luis Yasso from Mexico and Ardo Lettinen from Finland, and we said, wouldn't it be nice if there was a label that just focuses on the old school sound, that does nothing but old school thrash and old school death metal, the music that we miss? And they said, yeah, that's actually a good idea. And I said, and we shall call it Old School Metal Records, just right on the nose, right? And they then I brought in a couple other people to talk about it. I talked to Ted from Death Angel, talked to Walter Morgan, who's one of my best friends, and and to many other people. But then I said, you know what, I'm just gonna do it. And I asked these guys to be my AR guys, to just look for bands that they think we should do. And I had only one requisite, and is that I have to like the music they're playing. I will not put anything out that I personally would not listen to. Right. So I did. So that happened. So I came back from Walken Open Air. That was August 2004. And I started the label in, I do believe, April of 2005. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so what going off is, so you start the label, right? Let's
Mm-hmm.
even just talk about the logo itself. For
Mm-hmm.
those of you who don't know, I'm going to kind of show it, but there's the logo without the glare, the guitar and the nice skull there.
Yeah.
But let's talk about just even getting your specific brand going and the
Mm-hmm.
images and whatnot. How did you approach it?
So this is the new logo that we did. I had a previous logo that I do believe Lori Sato, who does Testament's website, did for me. And then that logo that you just showed was my niece who did that. She is a graphics designer and artist. She does a lot of anime stuff, and I told her what I wanted, and she just whipped that up. But the brand establishment was all around being schooled, right? How do we kind of make fun of the old school moniker, but kind of wrap it around, hey, it's time to be schooled about what music you really should be listening to.
Mhm.
And I worked with Mark DeVito, who is an incredible artist. He was out of the Bay Area. He just recently moved, but he is that's the old one. But he did a lot of work for Metallica and Motorhead, for those who don't know. So him and I worked very closely. He was a good friend of Craig Bearhorst of the Ruffians, and he introduced me to him. So he pretty much did all of my record design. So whenever I had to, create art files for the records or for the CDs, he would arrange it. He would do all my advertisements. So I worked very close with him on all that to establish my brand, and it was kind of like tongue in cheek with the getting schooled stuff. So that's how that started.
And let's go to your first kind of signing. How did it
Mm-hmm.
kind of come about?
So the first signing was the Ruffians, and the Ruffians came about. Walter Morgan said that that I should go talk to Craig Bearhorst, who's the guitar player of the Ruffians, that they're interested in doing something. So I went to see him. They run a screen printing business out of Emeryville called TNT Screen Printing. So they screen print all the shirts for the metal bands in the Bay Area, pretty much. But we became friends, and I kind of thought that would be cool to release, a double CD in the U.S. only. So this was in the U.S. only because this was released in Germany already on a German label, and I forgot which label they released it on. But it was kind of like, the Carl Albert years and the New Singers years. So it was kind of like a whole culmination of all the music. So I liked that one. That was the first one I did. Yeah, that's the one. And that was put together. I actually helped produce that, which was kind of really cool because I've never done that. I've never sat in a mastering, session and oh, that sounds good, let's do this and stuff like that. So I was participating in all of that, and that was my first exposure to that. So that was cool.
Absolutely. And when do you kind of let the artists dictate their specific images as far as their album covers go? And then I'm sure there have been a couple moments where it's like, I don't think that's going to work. But generally speaking, is it the case where you kind of just let the bands kind of just dictate their own thing, and what you're there for is kind of to get that specific brand and music just out there? That's your only specific goal?
That is exactly that was the goal of the thing. I told them, you bring me the recording, I will not tell you if I don't that you need to re-record something or anything like that. I will tell you if the graphics are outrageous, that I'd rather not. But that was the only stipulation I had. The rest I really full creative freedom. I would never tell a musician what they need to do. That's not how that works for me.
Okay. And so you get the CD. What is your next step? I mean, you have to know people to kind of get this specific music out there. And I know nothing about, when it comes to how this stuff works. So just walk me through what your specific process was.
Yeah. So all of it started kind of like as a web store, because it takes quite a while to build those relationships that you just mentioned with a distributor, with
marketing and PR.
Marketing and PR. PR was the easiest one, right? Because they actually will come to you and say, "Hey, I'm a PR firm. Do you need my services?" and stuff like that. And it took a while. First I thought I can do it myself, and I actually it worked for a while because I had built some relationship, with Muncie Ritchie from who does radio promotion. So he got me on Sirius, he got me on all kinds of stuff, right? That worked, and he also had contacts for other things. And then, some grassroots stuff where you find record stores and you sent them, like Rockstack in Japan, and there's they would buy 100 CDs at a time for their different things, and then you would have the same in Europe. And then after a while, once people see, once I had certain bands, like Lost Rockets, Suicidal Angels, Cryptos, that actually got the interest of some of the distributors like PhD, Plastic Head, and others. And then at the end, I even got actual real distribution, in the US as well. But some distributors, they go like, well, you're not selling $50,000 a month. It's not happening. And it's like, there's no way, as a small label, a homegrown, label like that you're going to be able to do that unless you have a band that tours 24/7. And none of my bands ever toured 24/7. None of them. The only band that actually toured a lot was Suicidal Angels, and look where they're now, right? They're world famous.
Sure. And generally speaking, was it difficult to get these bands on, out to, I don't know, say the record stores that you kind of just named? Did they specifically have a specific sound that they wanted, or it was on Old School Metal Records, so let's just
Yeah.
put it out because it's on Old School Metal Records?
Yeah. So you have to write a one sheet, right? So every CD that you put out has a one sheet, and that where you highlight the key things of the band, the key things of the record, and you kind of want to get the people interested that way, and then they will tell you if they want it or not. Um, you know, PhD actually, they got the one sheet and they would always order something. They never said no to any of the records. Um, in the US, it's a little harder. Like I said, it took a long time to actually get distribution in the US because we were just too small. They were not interested. Europe is a little different. I mean, the Europeans picked up the CDs. They wanted it, and but the US, for some odd reason, was just not into it. And it was hard.
Do you think it had something to do with, though, because the buying of physical media at this point? Because I mean, the downloads were kind of huge at this point. This is pre-streaming and whatnot, so
Yeah.
not a lot of people were buying physical media, and still aren't because of streaming and digital and whatnot.
Yeah, I think LPs changed that a little bit. People are back on buying vinyl, but yeah, you're right. CDs, I haven't bought a CD in probably 2 years.
Unless they get sent to you for free or something.
Yeah, if I get it sent to me, right? But I'll buy LPs or digital. Those are my two mediums I buy.
And interestingly enough, during the time when you specifically started this label, I think you only put out like one or two, vinyls at that point, correct?
I actually only started putting out vinyl probably with.
You did it for Anger is Art, and then
Anger is Art, Hubris Inc. was the LPs we did, because we did a picture LP for that. So the way I worked the label is, at first I was like, I want to put out a CD, and then I'm like, I want to put out a DVD, and then I actually want to put out an LP, because so I made myself certain goals that I wanted to achieve. And I achieved all the goals that I wanted before I shut the label down end of last year. But it was literally like that, digital. I did EPs, I did LPs, I did picture discs, I did all of that, and and it was just, do I have the money to put it out? Because in all fairness, right? I mean, this was never making money. People think it's a glory thing to have a small label. You most likely are doing it for the love of the music and for helping your friends out. It's not about the money. If it was about that, I would have had to give up a long time ago. I was fortunate enough to make it my very expensive hobby.
Well, it's just like being in a band. That's what being in a band is. It's a very expensive hobby. So you can correlate the same kind of things, right?
Yeah.
Between the label and a band. Now, can I ask you, about kind of your contracts and what you would give up versus what you would get from the bands and whatnot. And I'm assuming when you signed it to, you did maybe one record or two record deal or something where, can you just explain your whole concept of it?
Yeah. So typically, I would do two records. That was the label. We would say two records with an option to do more. I mean, if you look at Anger is Art, we did 5 records, right? Essentially, and Potential Threat, we did 2, I think. But it's that, and they would give me all the recording, they would give me all the artwork. I would take care of all the marketing and physical production. They would also get a specific amount of CDs to sell themselves as payment, and then if we made a profit, they would get money from the profits.
Now, how rare was how rare was that though to happen?
That happened once.
Okay. Oh, can you tell me the specific time?
Of the profit, you mean?
Yeah, when something like that would happen.
It was Hexen 2 years ago when we
Oh,
finally
okay.
caught up and made a profit.
Okay. And
Yep.
so you would sign them to one or two labels. They would get
Mhm.
what 10% or something like that when it came to the physical product or whatever
Yeah,
it is.
they would get typically 20%, so like 200 CDs, and they could buy more for $5 a CD, which kind of covered my cost. Yeah.
Okay, and going off of this or whatever, I mean, generally the bands are probably happy with this because did they own their specific stuff, like the
They
master
all
recordings and
all of it.
so again, your ultimate goal, and I love this because more labels should be doing this. It's how kind of music is growing these days because of it. Is
Mhm.
your job is your goal or whatever is just to get the music out there, right?
Mhm.
It's not to own somebody else's stuff for all of eternity in perpetuity or whatever it is.
I think that is weird. I think I just it's weird because you created this music. Why should I own it? It should be yours. I never thought of that. Again, maybe that's why, why I was never that successful, right? From that perspective. I mean, I did put out 25 records. I would call that a success, but um, like other labels, right? That have bands touring and take money from the merchandise and all that stuff. I never really did that unless like if I made the merchandise for the company for them, to front them the money so they could go out and do shows and do merchandise, then I would obviously need to get paid back. But otherwise, I don't own any logos. I don't own any of the music. That's all their music.
Sure, but again, and again, I think that was super important. I mean, it's super important to me as a musician to have a team like that, where we're all working towards kind of the same goal here.
Mhm.
It's not just like it's not about the dollar; it's about the
Yeah,
music. So,
yeah.
now, can you explain kind of? And I asked Andre this question, and I kind of got some sort of footing on it. But can you walk me through just the signing of Hexen? Because I really do
Mhm.
appreciate. I mean, I like the second one a little bit better, but I do think this one holds a lot of weight within the specific community. So can you kind
Yeah.
of walk me through the signing of Hexen?
Yeah, so I was talking to Tack, and he said, "Hey, I'm working with this band, or I don't know if he was a founding member or not. I can't remember, but he somehow I met him. I used to travel to LA a lot to go to shows, Death Angel and Exodus and all that stuff, because that's how I met Steve Gaines from Anger is Art and Jimmy Durkin and Luana, and all these guys, and I met Tack somehow, and we got to talking, and he said, "Hey, I have this band that I think you should listen to," and he sent me the demo to Blast Radius, right? That whole Hexen first thing, it was just like, wow, now that is some intense music. I love it. So I started talking to him, and then he said, "Yeah, let's get a meeting on with the band." I said, "Hey guys, I'd be interested to put out a record. What do you guys think?" And they were fairly new, but they also were got the eye of Dave Mustaine, and Dave Ellefson, I think. And I thought, like, I mean, if those guys say you play pretty good music, then I think that might be interesting for me to take a look at. So that's kind of how I signed them. And they were, I put a lot of marketing into them. I put a lot of time into them. I mean, if you look, typically I never paid for any of the artwork. I actually paid for that artwork that you just showed a minute ago, because that's Ed Repka, who did that, and I paid for that, which I never did. I never paid for any of that, but I thought this release really deserved kind of something special, and they I mean, Andre had a really big vision, right? I mean, he came with this vision and he said, "This is what I want. Can you do that?" And there was a little bit of forward and backwards, right? I mean, it was a big undertaking, to spend that kind of money on a single band as a hobby, but that was how that all started.
Interesting. Now let's go. I'll get back to Hexen in a minute, but I kind of want to know kind of the first response to an old school metal release. So you release your first ever one. Is there a big kind of splash in the metal community with this stuff? Is it kind of ever growing, and then it gets to a specific point where the splashes become more big, more massive and massive as time kind of moves on?
Yeah, I think it was probably a slow trickle. It wasn't a splash. I mean, I always had to pay for advertisements to get the bands out there. I always had to, pick and choose, how I want to approach the market. I mean, if you look at the releases like Ruffians, that's power metal, Anger's Art, thrash. Some of it is death metal, some of it is power metal, some of it is like Iron Maiden, some of it is like like Sepultura. So you kind of have to change your approach every single time, because you're kind of marketing to slightly different markets, if you will. So that was it. I don't think it ever was rolling like where it was a machine that was doing itself. So I always had to push it.
And so by the time the Hexen release kind of came out, this record was kind of big for the specific community. I mean, people still talk about the Stage of Insurgency record. But also we had forums back then like Thrash Unlimited that was promoting it heavily and whatnot. And
I think that it's word of mouth, right? Word of mouth got around, there were, I think when I started with Lost Rocket, that helped, right? Because that had an established name. Anger's Art also helped. I mean, I don't know how well you know Steve, but
I'm good friends with him.
Yeah, he's a machine. He is a marketing machine. He would. I mean, for somebody who's been in the scene that long to be like that, I only know kind of two people that are like that, and one is Caton, who's a dear friend of mine, and then Steve. Right? They really truly know what grassroots is about. That's why Higher X is so successful, and I think that's why Anger's Art is still around. Because they really truly know from the bottom that this is not a given, and you have to put in your own work. And that's what it was. I mean, you asked me about what I expected of the band. I kind of expected the bands to help with that, right? Because it's as a small label, it's hard to do it all by yourself. So you need the buy-in from the bands.
Absolutely. I've always maintained that myself, and I guess that's probably why we're still around too. You gotta have to put in the fucking work. You can't. I never. This is just for me speaking. But I never relied on just one person to do everything, right? Because I'm the only one that's going to believe in this specific band. If I have help doing it, that's just the bonus, right? So I think more bands could have done this better on your specific label in question. I'm not going to point out which ones, but that's a huge testament on why certain ones are still around, like you just mentioned earlier. I fully agree. So.
Yeah, and it's also interesting, that again, without naming names, some of the people that have been around for a long, long time, they know that you have to put in the work, where others, feel like, it should be given to them, and you can see a clear success difference. If you look at Suicidal Angels, right, a band out of Greece that I signed because they were just blowing me away. I still talk to these guys today. They have not been on my label for 15 years, and I still talk to those guys every couple of weeks. And they have approached this exactly that way, right? They put in the work. They did expect certain things, which is perfectly fine, from a marketing perspective. And the same with most of the other bands, they did their parts, and that's why I think that's why it worked.
Absolutely. And I think you were reaching goals, one step at a time within these specific bands and whatnot. Now let's go to kind of, you mentioned LA, you mentioned, did you start to kind of go to the new wave thrash shows like Thrasher to Miles and whatnot? Did you start to notice any of this kind of trend?
I didn't go to those shows, but I did see the trend. You saw opening acts that were, 15, 16-year-old kids, 18-year-old kids that were kind of bringing it, wearing the sneakers, the skin tight jeans, and just like you thought you were at an 80s thrash show, and it was kind of comical to a certain point, but also really cool to see, that these people are picking up the torch and running with it. Yeah, so I did notice that. I actually, talk to some of those bands sometimes when I saw them. That's the cool part, right? When once I had the label, people will come up to me and talk to me, and ask questions, ask for guidance sometimes. And that was kind of cool, right? Even though I didn't sign those guys or they were not on my label, we like you said, the community, we were friends.
Absolutely. And the ultimate goal still with where I'm hearing with you specifically is it comes down to the music, right? You want the music to get out to as many people as possible. That's always the ultimate goal.
That's all that matters. Music needs to get to the masses.
Absolutely, man. Now let's go to kind of like the later stages of the label and whatnot, and vinyl was kind of making a resurgence. When would you say mid 10s, like 2015, 2016 era?
Yeah.
Now, why didn't you specifically kind of put out more of the vinyls per se? Was it the cost of it, or was it the did you think it wouldn't sell as well during that time, or?
A little bit of both, probably, right? Again, vinyl was just starting up again, and my thing was, I'm catering to a certain type of crowd, and when you make vinyl, right, you need to make at least 1,000 in order to kind of make it somewhat cost effective. It's still, making 1,000 CDs versus making 1,000 LPs, that's triple the amount of money that you use, for LPs. So it's a lot more expensive to make an LP. So it's not like I had a few money, to throw around, and just otherwise I would have just made LPs, right? But some of the stuff sold well, and some of the stuff, didn't sell at all,
with LPs that I've noticed is there's always a risk factor too, because they can get damaged. CDs, you can swap out cases and whatnot, if it's a jewel case and if they get damaged, but that's dead stock. Once vinyls get damaged and whatnot, it becomes dead stock, and you have to sell it for cheaper to kind of try and get your money back with it. So again, the risk factor, I could see the risk factor kind of playing in that specific part as well for you. You know what I mean?
There definitely is that, right? Also, shipping is more expensive, right? You have to buy shipping containers for LPs versus you can put a CD in an envelope, in a padded envelope. I don't think I've had more than one or two damaged LPs that I ever shipped out, which I was lucky, I guess. But I had at any given time, 30 boxes in my garage of stuff, and it becomes a little bit much at times. But again, you do it for the love of the music. You wanted to get out there, but LPs. Some LPs sold okay. I think if Hexen made an LP, of the State of Insurgency, that would have gone really well. We never did that. Some others, like the Anger's Art Hubris, that was okay. I think it worked better for Steve to sell it and the band to sell it at the shows than for me. But most of the CDs sold better than the LPs.
Well, yeah, and I think what's important, like, again, it's the music and whatnot. And Steve, I think with picture discs, they don't sell well as well as, say, a vinyl record. People want the sleeves, they want the inserts. I could see it being a problem just from the picture.
Yeah, we did make an insert for the picture disc, and it came with a plastic sleeve and everything, right? But it's still, and I thought it was actually a pretty cool artwork. Most of the Anger's Art artwork prior to that was done by a really good friend of mine, Eddie Mice, who's out of Colorado, who's an incredible artist. If you should check him out, Eddie Mice, Mize. But he's an incredible artist. So that was the first one that was different, and I actually liked it because it kind of, it was really popping, But the other thing that I, whenever I made an LP, I did put in the digital code.
Right, so you got the best of both worlds.
That's a pet peeve of mine.
Sure.
If I'm buying the LP, I should not have to go and buy the digital if I want to listen in another way. So I always included that. Again, may not have been the smartest business move, but again, it was to get the music out so people can enjoy it, and they already paid for it. Why would you pay it again? Doesn't make sense to me.
I agree. I always feel that it's important to give, to get the music, any format that people will consume it, that is super important. I hate going online and seeing like something like this, right? And having to pay $80 for it. I'm just not going to do it, So the fact that some of the records that are on your label are kind of like that now, it kind of sucks,
The Suicidal Angel one is like that. The Hexen one is like that. Yeah, I mean, that shows that people liked it. We didn't put out that many records of those, right? I do believe Hexen, we put out 1,500 or 2,000. That's it. And then the Suicidal was also 1,000. And we never repressed. Typically, we did repress that Hexen for 500 additional copies, but that was it. And Anger's Art too, by the way. They all the first, I think the first 2 or 3 records sold out.
Right.
Yeah.
So I obviously that with Hexen, they're getting ready to reissue these records, which is I love this fact or whatever. But again, I don't think music should be super expensive. I don't think you should have to sell your home to get a record. It's but and that's why it's hard, right? If you look at how much a musician makes for a record, right? It's cents on the dollar for each digital play, and then if you look at a CD, they make $1 off a CD if they're lucky, right? It's a hard business. People do not make money in the music business from selling CDs. They're making money from selling merch and doing concerts. And none of my bands wanted to tour. The only band that is actually actively touring is Suicidal Angels, and they have been for the last 15 years. And look where they're at now, right? They're
they're actually established pretty well in Europe. I do believe they're on AFM records. You know, you tour, you make money, you can sustain.
Absolutely. And now where are you at in terms of the label? I know you mentioned you closed it down last
Yeah.
year. So give me that whole story for you and you know, your reasons for closing the label at this time.
It lost its fun. And I tell you what it was. It was all around distribution and digital distribution. You know, the Orchard has done very good thing for me, but they also decided to copyright videos and just take artists' name, you know, music and copyright it as themselves. You know, and I'm like, you know, so I lost my distribution deal because I had to, you know, take music off the digital. So then it became a real chore, you know, because I had to kind of go all the way back to my roots where I would have had to do everything by hand, and that was just, I was not up for that anymore.
Wait. So explain to me real quick. Orchard. So,
yeah. So YouTube, if you put a music on YouTube, and it's the Orchard went through and copyrighted all that stuff that was associated with my bands on YouTube. And it became a battle. You know, you can ask Steve. He had to make phone calls to them, and I had to make phone calls to them, and then the only option I had was take Anger is Art off digital distribution totally.
No, but I'm not. I guess I'm not understanding what Orchard is and what Orchard does.
Sorry, the Orchard is the digital distribution.
Okay,
it's called the Orchard.
So it's a digital distribution company. Is that what it is?
Yeah, they feed the Apple. They feed all the digital media outlets.
Okay, so they're essentially, you put it on, say, like a CD Baby or DistroKid or something, and it's under Orchard is what it is.
The Orchard would send it out automatically to like 30, 40 different digital outlets.
I see. And so I'm just kind of trying to explain it to the people because, you know, so essentially what you're saying is that what they would do is if you put on, if you notice bands with like, it's like the band name and then dash topic, right? This is what I always see Orchard, the name Orchard in, and they put their own videos on, and it's like the topic, and then they get all the ad revenue from it. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Correct. Okay. Yeah, that's what it sounded like to me. And then on top of that, right, it kind of like, even though I always left the copyright and the publishing right to the band, they were claiming copyright in certain things, and that's not acceptable, right? And Steve tried to take them off. So I took them all off. And then because I took it all off, right? Because when you do digital sharing, you know, your distribution gets a part of that. And because I had to take several bands off, that revenue to the distribution went away. So they kicked me out, right? They decided, we don't want to deal with you anymore because we're not making money off of you anymore, which is understandable, but frustrating to me, right, as a label. And then it became a chore. And then I just said, you know what, I'm out.
And so what are you doing nowadays? How are you keeping busy in music related kind of stuff?
I go to shows, you know, I am contemplating to eventually do something again, but maybe more on the hardcore side than the metal side, you know. But right now I'm not doing much at all besides, you know, talking to people if they have questions and supporting them and going to shows and just be part of the community.
Absolutely. And is there a place before I let you go? I really do appreciate a couple minutes of your time and
yeah, of course,
with me and educating the folks here on kind of what labels kind of go through, and especially the independent ones.
And I might be an outlier, right? It might not be for everybody like that, and it might be the way I approach it, that I was alone and all that stuff, you know. But yeah,
absolutely. But I'm just kind of curious, you know, is there a place where people can get, some of the back catalog of old school metal records? I mean, is it just all gone at this point? There's no 30 boxes sitting in your garage anymore?
Nope.
Okay.
All gone. All gone. I gave most of the CDs to the bands that I had left over. Just gave it to them because, I thought that was the right thing to do.
Absolutely. Well,
So if you do, so the only place to do, go see the show of the bands, if they're still around, and they may have the records still. I'm pretty sure Anger's Art still has a couple, and
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, now where can people, if people do have questions regarding labels and contracts and whatnot, I'm sure you'd be ever so willing to help bands, give advice or whatever. Where can they find you?
Sure. Facebook, Instagram. I'm on most social medias. You can look me up, Patrick Swissman Ramseier. If you have questions, hit me up.
Absolutely. Well, Pat, I really do appreciate you coming on the show and hanging. It means so much.
Yeah.
Now another edition of Poppitt's Corner, guys. I'm out. Cheers.